Sure. So our warm up is usually there's either two things. It's usually ISOs, a series of different ISOs, or uh, we'll just play a small sided game for a couple minutes. And it usually depends on the demeanor of the athletes, the way they come in. If they're like really bogged down from like play and tournaments that they're already doing, we'll spice it up. It's like, all right, let's just work our way slow into a gameplay. But if they're pretty like in good spirits, all right, we'll start with some ISOs, reps, oscillations, and then we'll go into some sort of plyo series, low extensive, whether it's just either simple bounding, skips, and then we'll work some figure eights, and then we'll add a ball to a figure eight. Hey, we're going to do this today, and then divide them up into teams. We'll play a little bit, flying 10, flying 20.
That was Jeremiah Flood, and you're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by our longtime sponsor, Simply Faster. There are a lot of sports technology companies out there, but Simply Faster is the only website you can go to that features an online store that covers the bandwidth of training technology, from force plates to timing systems to muscle stimulators and more. Some products of Simply Faster that I use and love include things like the Freelap timing system in K-Box, or coaches' favorites such as GymAware. Recently, Simply Faster has added 2 units that as a coach you should definitely take a look at. The first is the Muscle Lab Contact Grid, which is an extremely affordable and portable, step-by-step, literally, system to collect data on jumps, bounds, sprints, agility, hurdle hops, and really as much as your creative mind can imagine. In what used to take a whole runway worth of data collecting strips, the Contact Grid does it all with only 2 small strips that together cover up to 40 meters of sprinting. Ground contact time, step rates, rhythms, and beyond are at your fingertips with this device. Another new unit, the VO2 Master, is an ultra-portable gas exchange analyzer. Don't guess on energy system development when you can get direct insight into VO2 capabilities in relation to specific sports skills, rather than being hooked up to tubes on a treadmill or worse yet, a cycle ergometer to get a VO2 max. Think of the VO2 Master as your own gas exchange lab without the tubes and wires. Deepen your analysis in the specific conditioning preparation of your athletes with the VO2 Master today. These products and incredible customer service make Simply Faster your go-to for your sports technology needs. I'm happy to have partnered with them in sponsoring this podcast. Their support has been tremendous, so check them out today at simplyfaster.com. That's simply with an I, faster.com. When I was a young athlete, I put tremendous time and energy into becoming the best physical athlete I could be. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be the best I could at the sports I played as well, but I really put my time and energy and investment into physical skills in many ways. I wanted to be as fast as I could, to jump as high as I could, to get stronger. And those things definitely helped me. I believe it helped me quite a bit in my high school basketball career. And becoming better physically was a huge factor in becoming a track and field athlete on the college level and what I accomplished there. But despite all that work on the physical, my weakness was absolutely mental and emotional ability, perceptual and reaction ability, and all the things that really that good athletes in their sport have. I was probably the king of frustrating my high school basketball coach with my inconsistency, having these flashes of ability, but then the next game scoring like 2 points and making a bunch of turnovers. And if I could go back in time, I would love to have a physical preparation coach who not only could have helped me in my physical abilities as I loved, but also to tie that in with the mental and emotional, the perceptive, reactive, all those elements that holistically speaking can help us maximize our outputs in the games we play. So that brings up our guest, Jeremiah Flood. He is a sports performance coach and the owner of Flood Sports, training company in Southern California. Jeremiah was a former NCAA D1 defensive back and later found the sport of rugby and eventually garnered a professional contract. I talked about how in my experience as an athlete, I worked super hard on the physical, really grinded that out in a way, but ignored the mental, emotional. And Jeremiah, as we'll talk about on the show, was kind of the opposite in his experience as an athlete. He was really seeking all those factors of gameplay, mental and emotional, and has this unique situation where now he works with athletes in a sports performance setting. And so today, as a term that Jeremiah has mentioned on his website, we'll be talking about the speed of the mind and the body. On the show today, Jeremiah is going to take us into his system on, yes, training speed and physical abilities, but how he blends that with gameplay, how he uses perception and reaction in various games, and then how he talks to athletes about their mental and emotional factors that lead into those games, and how he uses that as a holistic vehicle to give athletes just the best facilitation they can to achieve their top sports performance on all factors, not just the physical, but also the mental. This was a really fun show, and all these chats on mental, emotional, technical, tactical, and perception reaction, and all these shows have made a big impact on me. I continually am finding myself reaching back into these shows and the concepts within, and looking at how I'm engaging athletes and how I can give them a better experience. So I'm really grateful for having these coaches like Jeremiah, on the show, and I'm excited to get this episode to you. Let's get on to it. Episode 258 with Jeremiah Flood. Jay, welcome to the show, man. First question I wanted to ask you is, especially given the topic of today's conversation, your experiences. I know a lot of coaches had some interesting revelations or ways that they had to change their training during COVID and getting kicked out of gyms. But tell me a little bit about what you did. What did you guys end up doing in the outdoor space, and how did that impact your training, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, so when we were told that the gym was going to close for 2 weeks, we just took it as that. And then we told the kids, all right, we'll be at this field, meet us here. 2 weeks turned into a couple of months, and a month turned into a year. But the bright side about it was there was no games, right? School was at home, so they were done with school relatively early. And in the summer, we focused a lot. We were able to focus on actual development and not just quote unquote microdosing, but we were able to work true acceleration, true max speed. We were able to expand some of our gameplay settings and really work scenarios and reaction and perception and action and read and react, and really take time to get into each individual's needs in regards to sport. So it was a hard process, a difficult and unprofessional setting where we had to jump fences to get to certain fields and parks and somehow hide 15 to 20 kids from onlookers, but we made it work.
Yeah, how do you train when there's no competition? I think a lot of coaches were in that boat. You had seasons getting canceled and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And now, and I've thought about this a lot myself lately, just like philosophically with training versus competing. And Paul Cater, who's north of you a little bit, has talked about this as like training. You don't have a coach there kind of like, looking, scrutinizing your every move. You have permission to be more creative or to basically experience things in a different way. And so I'm curious how you took on that time where there's not, there's this huge chunk where you're not competing. What was the messaging? Yeah. Like how did athletes respond?
So we knew that sports would come back, right? So first day I was like, look, we don't know when sports are going to happen. We know they're going to happen. So we're just going to prepare you for when it does happen. And thankfully, we've already had a history of having games. Like we have a particular game that we play, and we played that every Friday it's going on 4 years now. And we already had that set up. So we just turned it into Fridays, we're going to play this game. Monday through Thursday, we are going to train like normal. We'll do our sprints and we'll develop you explosively, plyometrically, work capacity, all the fun training stuff. And we could work on certain scenarios for that particular game. So we turned it into our it's called Gatorball, our little Gatorball league. And we would have set teams for a period of time. So there'd be like a mini series, and then every month we'd change teams and so forth and so forth. So I knew that like when sports eventually come back, or I assumed that when sports would come back, sport coaches would try to catch up on lost time. And so that was our biggest focus, to prepare them for that, like prepare them for those sport coaches to run them into the ground. And it sounds so bad, but run them into the ground, overwork, and like we only have a week left to get ready for season, things like that. But thankfully for those who showed up pretty much every day for 9 months, they're alive and well in their season, and they withstood that part. But I think having that game and having some sort of structured, scheduled competition, that took some of the ease off and itch off for the athletes.
I could totally see that. Yeah, I think no matter what, and maybe that's the balance. Like, there's always some culmination of what you're doing. That's
Yeah.
where it comes together. And how do you play Gatorball? Like, what's the deal there?
So that's the fun part. So Gatorball actually started off as a childhood game that I played. So it was team handball, but you got to tackle each other. Okay. Just no rapid, just hard shoulder charge. You, like, kill the man with the ball. I don't know if you played that growing up, but we played that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this similar thing. Obviously, we can't tackle here. So we combined that premise, team handball, with a rugby drill I used to do when I played, is that if you get tagged or tackled, your whole team has to get up, touch the goal line where the other team is operating on a fast break. And so that was our hide the conditioning part of the game.
Mm.
And so even team 7-on-7, 10-on-10, whatever the split is, to make it interesting and sport specific to whoever's playing. So basketball players, they can dribble. That makes them immune to the tag. But then it also forces them to think. So, like, if I dribble on grass, do I really have handles? Should I pass? The ball can be stolen. So it's like a risk-reward ratio. Soccer players, as long as the ball's on their foot, they can't get tagged as well. They're immune, but they're not immune from someone slide tackling. They're not immune from contact. What else is there? Oh, and for creativity and just embarrassing taking ankles, if you like meg yourself or meg an opponent, it's a +1 bonus point. So that's where things get interesting, because like they're just going out for blood. They're going out to take your ankles. They're going to try to meg you, embarrass you, get an extra point. So we usually play up to, I think one time we played up to 100, and that could take any team to like 60 minutes, depending on how even the teams are matched. But that's the soul like breakdown of the game. It's just team handball with particular sports skills that you can use to your advantage or disadvantage.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of just, and we talked about it a little bit before we started recording, but sneaking conditioning in there, where it's like, it's conditioning, but it doesn't feel like, it's not like, oh, it's the end of practice and we got to run and all that. And
exactly.
I've had such good luck having sport athletes play a game to warm up that is not their sport. So that's already fun. And then a situation where, like, if a team that lost the game, I never thought of like having it like live in the game. I think my mind just works a little slower with some of that stuff, because I'm not the perception reaction, how to really drill that in is not my true strength for sure. But I would have like, if you won this round, then the other team has to do like a court suicide or something. And it never was right. Oh, I'm like, it's just like, oh, I lost. Okay, got to do it. I'll win the next game, And so it's like you play and then sneak a little bit of running in, and then everyone's got a smile on their face. It's like even the team that had to run, they still got a smile on their face. They're still enjoying it. Come back, let's play the next game. Okay, you lost. You guys got to do like 20 push-ups or something. It's not. So I always psychologically it just goes down. I feel like, and it's not like I like the idea too of mixing. I don't want to get too like in the weeds, like the physio and neurological, but like when you mix like a long-term stimulus, like a longer run with short bursts, and then go back to long and back to short bursts, I just think the body also responds to that better. It's a better wave than like, practice with a bunch of little short stuff, and then, all right, we're going to run you hard, like up and down the field for 20 minutes. It just goes down better mentally and psychologically. Yeah.
And the constraints are like the same. Like it could be like, we would change the field size. It would never be the same field size. So the run back to your goal line, if your teammate got tagged, could be really short, it could be really long. And it would force like teams to actually make formations. So we would have like a formation like soccer. You would have a back line, a middle line, and your strikers, so to speak. And that's where the kids got really creative as far as using quote unquote skills or their sport specifics to their advantage. Like, all right, well, you play safety and you're a linebacker, you should probably be in the back line. And just in case if we get tagged, you guys can run up and stop ball. And so it was fun to see the different athletes from different sports communicate and play to each other's strengths, or times when they didn't play to each other's strengths and it was just a massacre.
Yeah, it's really, the blending of all these qualities is so intriguing to me. Like, not just reducing the noise. Basically, we're getting everything we need you to get as an athlete with almost as minimal disruption of flow in an hour and a half as humanly possible. And the point where the athlete walked out and they're exhausted, but they don't necessarily felt like they had a coach cracking the whip on them. It was all almost
Exactly.
there was so much intrinsic motivation because of the tasks at hand. It just, it organically emerged that way. And so that would be kind of like the main theme of what I wanted to ask you for a lot of these questions is what got you interested in the blend of cognitive development with physical development, or basically combining these elements we see in games with that of training and everything that goes with that, with a mind, body, physical perspective.
It started with rugby, actually. When I was transitioning from college football to rugby, is obviously a huge difference in skill sets, perception and action as far as catching, keeping your eyes ahead of you, and then passing. It really forced me to build that ability to scan the field. I didn't have that when I first tried to play rugby. And I thought I could just use my speed and physicality, but in rugby, everyone has that.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to find a way to differentiate myself or just evolve myself. And I watched the best players, and they were able to anticipate gaps, set their teammates up in gaps, which is probably the most underrated thing about rugby. Is like, I'll take these two on. You have a 40-meter try, go ahead. So I would just watch a lot of film of the All Blacks from New Zealand, Argentina, guys that I wanted to emulate. And that led to reading the book Legacy. And
Yeah, good book.
They talk about keeping a blue head. And I noticed in my games that I would not see the field, like the field would be blurry. So either I was too stressed, like I didn't have control of my like breath or things, something like that. So reading the book Legacy, keeping a blue head, that led to the book The Champion's Mind, which I recommend for most athletes. It really gets down to the mindfulness part of being an athlete and how to set up a routine, how to self-talk, which is very important. From there, led to the Performance Cortex, the baseball book. And I didn't realize, like, I have a master's in exercise science. I had no idea that decision making can be trained, right? So those three books led to, maybe there's something out there that I don't know. And then that led, again, down the rabbit hole of the Playmaker's Advantage. And that was the book that really like set everything off for me. And then at that same time, when I was finishing up rugby, deciding whether to go professional or not, I was working with these kids, like this same group that we have now, but 4 years prior. And I just started implementing things based off feedback from parents that there was like a disconnect between speed training and performance training to their actual game.
Yeah, and that's something I know we'll circle back on at some point is your training methods and then what are expectations from parents or coaches in training. And I think that
right.
as the sports performance field does become more integrated with the mind, the body, the decisions, and reducing noise and making it all more organic. But you mentioned two things there. I'm sure there's probably more, but the routine and the self-talk. How do you set up? I think about this if I was to include games, which I will include like small ones that I can handle with training and that I understand. But I think that almost more important than the game is, well, what are you noticing an athlete doing in the game? Like where's their hangups? Like where do they have their greatest issues, and how do you help them to overcome that? And so how do you set up your training, and how do you give them feedback on some of those elements, like routine, for example, maybe your routine, self-talk, if you want to pick one or two of those things, and how do you go after those with a training session?
Sure. So we'll start with routine. I usually ask all of them when I first meet them, or now that they're older and they're in high school. It's like, what do you do before games? Do you have a routine? Most of them say no. Like, I don't. I was like, do you listen to music? Do you listen to that? And they're like, no. Okay. I was like, here are these 5 questions. I want you, and they're very I was like, you don't have to show me your answers, but I want you to answer these questions. And it's just, what are my goals? What do I enjoy about sports or about the game I play? What do I want from this? What are my strengths and what are my weaknesses? And it forces them to be really honest with themselves, hopefully, right? Some of them show me, some of them don't. So it just forces them to like really take a self inventory. And a couple days, I'll give them a couple days to write that out. And then we'll talk about it. And it's like, did you do the questions? And they're like, yes. So I was like, so what is going to help you? How does your coach use you? And I think that's a missing component because I'm not their sport coach. So I have to understand how their coach will use them in their system or in what's their role in the team. And then we just set that up. Like, it's like, oh, my coach really wants me to be a slasher. Okay, cool. We'll set up drills to where you have to slash, take contact, finish at the cup. or my coach really wants me to work on my catch and shoot, or I want to be able to do this. And so it's very athletically empowered. Then it's up to me to give them the environment to either fail or succeed along those lines. And then with self-talk, that's just a conversation you have to have with them. And usually that doesn't happen until 15, 16 in my experience, to when there's a lot of expectations on them from parents and coaches. And it comes down to like, well, what do you actually want from this? How do you feel? And then they go on, and it's that. I think this pandemic helped us to get into that realm. Usually with conversations you wouldn't have during a normal school year, but this really helped elicit those conversations, really grease the wheels on it. And we've had kids, or I've had athletes that I would share stories for myself. Like, this was my mantra when I needed to like regain composure, narrow my focus to just the task at hand. And then they would come up with, hopefully they say they did. Hopefully they came up with their own mantra.
Yeah, I think that stuff is so important, because like you said, you have a master's in, I think, exercise physiology or science, right? Like I have a similar educational background, and like there was no talk of
Zero.
Any of that stuff. There might have been, I did take a sports psychology class, but it wasn't so much. It was more, I think, from the perspective of maybe just general concepts as a coach, but nothing into like, there wasn't like visualization or self-talk or any of that. It was more like the technical terms, team cohesion and team this, and that if you're one thing I remember from that course was like, if you're the home team in a basketball game, you're going to get more like blocks and steals because you're all pumped up.
Right.
And if you're like, stuff like that was what I remember, but I don't remember anything with
a glossary of terms.
Yeah, that I was going to go and play intramural basketball later and be like, oh yeah, this is why I keep screwing this up or something. Like, I just never, and it like it's, or when I went and played golf like later that year and was, hitting everything left and right, like nothing that you really would take with you from that level. And so I love the idea of asking athletes, like giving those questionnaires. I think it's a good practice for coaches to do that, because otherwise I feel like it's easy to assume that every athlete is going to love your system and love your exercises and love the mold that you want to put them in, when in a lot of cases this is just the physical conditioning and strength component. This isn't even the game. And so one of the things that I feel like is interesting is, what have you found, what's your take on the athlete who may not, I think a lot of strength coaches or performance coaches will say, oh, this athlete, like they just don't want to work hard. They don't talk about like the weight room and training. Like they don't want to run. They don't want to do this. Like I think it's interesting, because I think there's a difference between observing and evaluating. Like you're making that you just evaluate the athlete, oh, they're lazy, but are you just observing them? What happens when they get in the game?
Right.
So what's your take with that type of athlete that I think frustrates a lot of people, but you've done your work and kind of digging beneath the surface on that.
Yeah, that's funny that you said that. The athletes that don't like to lift and run, I was that athlete. I never wanted to do any of it. So I think for us, it comes down to, again, it goes back to that questionnaire, because then you can hold them accountable to their words, right? And then you just have to find a way to lynch their goals to what you're doing into the actual weight room. As like, this is the type of player you want to be. This will help you. And then you can like compromise and find like, all right, we're going to do this X in the weight room, but we'll have some skill stuff going on at the same time. So it's kind of what we did. We did that a lot at the field, where we would 20 minutes of gameplay, and then we'd get into our plyometric series. And then we'd go 20 minutes of more gameplay. And then we get into, and we use the gameplay to like raise the competitive juices, raise the arousal states into flying 10s and flying 20s. And then everyone would PR. Like as soon as one kid hits a PR, everyone's like, oh, I'm running. I got this. My turn now. So we just had to like weave that and then take it away from them after a certain amount of time. It's like, okay, cool. We did that. Now we actually have to do quote unquote hard work, because this is just part of the process. Like there will be times in life where you have to do things that you don't really want to do. This is one of those times. It's just paraphrasing, but it was just creating that merge and then holding them accountable to their words. It makes it pretty easy to get that athlete to do something they don't technically really want to do.
Yeah.
So I think that was the way we went about it, and it seemed to work.
I like that it's their words and not yours. Jamie
Mhm.
Smith, when he was on the US Strength, when he was talking about just how much decision making and autonomy he gives the athletes in his program. Because it's like, we're
Mhm.
not training these athletes to be robots. We're training them to be decision makers, to play a big part in this process. And when you
Exactly.
can have an athlete say something and hold them accountable to that, and then show them, well, okay, if you want to be this kind of player, look, you do need to do XYZ here, but maybe you don't need to do XYZ here. And I think that's a big thing, because a lot of athletes, at least in the gym context, they're just always told, "Oh, well, you just have to, bust your ass," and you do, like, but it's in context. Like, what? How are you
Yeah,
busting your ass? you know?
it's a relation, yeah, to what they want, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I
Yeah.
would say too, I haven't worked in elite like team sport, but I imagine a lot of the best athletes are not the ones who like just live and breathe the gym. They are PhDs in their sport, and they do
Hmm.
everything kind of revolves around that, as I understand it for the most part. So it's almost like maybe it's like a microcosm of just what it means to be a really good athlete in your sport, and then how do we treat everything else.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest thing for us. Is like one, making sure they understood their sport. So we had instances where parents would come up and like the sport coach is, or their soccer coach is calling my daughter slow, and we test her like, she's kind of fast. She's 13, 115, 112 in the flying 10, like it's pretty quick. And it's just like, well, the coach is calling her slow, and it's like, well, send film and let's see if she's actually slow, or is she not being used the way she should be used, or is she not understanding the system, or she doesn't trust what she sees. And more often than not, it's a little bit of all three of those things, where she doesn't trust the system, or she doesn't, her style of play doesn't fit the team, and then you have to fit that, find a way to get her to merge with the system of the team while still keeping her individuality or his individuality with anything. So that's, I think it's a what I try to fix the most. I try to find links and bridges between all three.
That's huge, because I feel like, if I was to ask you, well, I will ask you, how often do you think that the linchpin, the limiting factor for an athlete in accomplishing their goals is just pure speed? You know what I'm saying? Like, how often is
Yeah,
that
yep.
is what they run in a fly 10? And nothing against that. I did a great podcast with Joel Reinhardt and Anna Cormier that talk about the flying 10s in season and that speed-based culture. I love
Yeah,
that stuff.
it's
But
fun.
and it's fun. Exactly. And it's just high coordination. I think it's really good. But at the same time, with the level of athletes you work at and just getting to that next level, getting to college, like, how often is that 10-meter speed, like, in your mind, like the big factor that's going to.
Yeah, it's really like, to be honest, it really isn't. Uh, it might help them express certain skills faster, and it might give them it does give them
Mhm.
confidence to like, this is how fast I am. I can use this on the field now. Like, that is true. This is how fast you can be, and this is how fast you are. How do you blend that with what you're doing on the field? I think one of the girls was like a freshman last season. She was all state, all CF, all of that stuff. Her flying 10 was like a 1-4 basketball point guard. But on the court, you can, she makes a cut, you can't stop her. So,
Mhm.
and she would tell you that, oh, I just watched the top foot of the defender and I know what to do from there.
Yeah, I've played
Like,
against
okay.
basketball players like that, and they dust me. Like, I can't, because it's like
Yeah,
by the time the decision's made, I don't care if I'm twice as fast as you. It doesn't, at that point, it doesn't, and especially a point guard, like that real small space, that real tight space.
hmm,
I mean, how many plays are made by a point guard where it's more than 5 yards that really made the difference
exactly.
for
Like,
the
they just
most
need
part?
that the little 18 inches of daylight for like Gale Sayers. But so that's this type of things. It's like physical. We're gonna make you physically fast. Like, we're going to. Now we're gonna create scenarios or environments to where, let's see if we can replicate that with a defender on you, catching a ball,
Mhm.
chasing a ball, or reacting to something goal oriented. And I think that's what the games that we use are designed for that. And that's why we kind of always follow up or sandwich the flying tens in between. So it's like, I hit a new PR. Let's see if I can do it again on the field, right? Things like that.
I wanted to take a break from the show and briefly share with you the difference that performance herbalism can make for you. Several years ago, I had Logan Christopher, CEO of Lost Empire Herbs, on the show to talk about hypnosis and mental training for athletes. While talking to him, I realized he also had an herbalism company. So shortly thereafter, I used the Phoenix formula, which was my first product I bought from them. I had great results with it, not only increasing my energy and decreasing my need for coffee and caffeine, but I also noticed that it was making an impact on my lifts and my weight room numbers. I was having a great training experience. Shortly thereafter, I also got into the Shilajit resin as well as other herbs. And I don't look at supplementation the same way. I'm a strong believer in what Logan and his company are doing in looking for a natural resource to boost human performance. If you want to check out the herbs that I use personally from Lost Empire Herbs, you can head to www.lostempireherbs.com/justfly. There you can get 15% off your order, and they offer a 365-day money-back guarantee. Definitely check them out. Let's get on back to the show. I love the sandwich. I talked about that on a few recent podcasts of like playing, maybe it's a Q&A one I just did, is like playing a game, 5-10 minutes, go run a fly 10, then go play a game. And I find that really helps the fly 10. It's like way more than if I just said, hey, we're going to do this 30-minute warm-up. It's going to be super specific, and then we're going to go run 3 fly 10s and we're gone. I've seen kids drop, like, it was in a 20, I saw a kid drop almost 2 tenths in a 20-yard dash just by playing a game instead of doing a typical, like, just let it rip. I mean, it was really phenomenal. And that's another thing, too. It's mentally, like, you're not sitting there, like, if you just do fly 10s, you're sitting there kind of between, like, let's say I'm doing 3 or 4, just mentally kind of, you know, maybe you don't care if you're like me, you're mentally beating yourself up on how to run faster, because that's always what I've done. But it's like you play a game, it's like, I played a game, this is fun. All right, just let the next one rip. Don't think about it too much. Just run fast. And it's just amazing what opening up all those explosive degrees can do. And then, so I like what you say. It reminds me a little bit about, actually, speaking of Joel and Andrew, that podcast we did, but Andrew talked about like having an athlete run and they have to like have their eyes like off to the side or something like that, because that's why they slowed down in the game. And so I just think that it's nice to start with some of these, especially like for someone like me, who's my game knowledge. I mean, I did basketball in high school, and honestly, I wasn't that good because of me just not being good and appreciating time and space. And I was maybe the opposite of you. I love lifting and running and training, and I didn't want to challenge myself with the sport. I just kind of played basketball because I wanted to dunk in a game. Like, that was probably maybe not half, but that was a big reason I wanted to play. It was just to try to express this physical, look how like much I've trained myself. Well, look, how, which is really unfortunate. It made me a worse player and probably less fulfilling too. But anyways, I just think it's such a cool thing. So anyways, what I'm saying is myself, like, I need almost things like that to start with. Like, okay, let's just do a 10. And maybe what's one thing that we could change to make this more relevant? And then that helps me, because sometimes I'll say like different 3-on-3s and 4-on-4s. I'm like, I do not know what the hell is going on here at all. It's like, it's almost like you're watching a whole new sport for the first time. You know what I'm saying? It's like I'm watching rugby and I do not know any rules. These people are throwing the ball backwards instead of forwards. I don't know what the hell is going on. You know what I'm saying? So I'm curious. Maybe you could take me through just like some of the simple, like basic, just game speed principles. So, like, how would you adjust a fly 10 for an athlete who might need something more out of it? How would you maybe craft even like some of the very baseline rocks of some of the games you play that try to develop some baseline skills?
All right. So let's take this athlete in particular. She had it's a funny story, but so her flying 10 without a ball, her head would turn and she'd run like this.
Facing left. I'm paraphrasing, but facing left.
Oh yeah. Facing left, jaw just twerk, just crooked, straining on her face. And then you give her a basketball. It's like, all right, try it with a basketball, because that's what she played. And she would run like the most elegant, graceful form, just a whole 180. And it was literally the next flying sprint. We didn't change anything except give her a ball and head forward. I guess like the form that everyone would love, and just honestly beautiful. So I was like, okay, you're going to run your flying 10s with a ball from now on, just for now on. And it was like maybe a 100th to a 10th like a 10th faster. Like, and so we worked different entries. So either coming from a left curve or a right curve, dribbling the ball. And then we added a screener. So I would like follow her, and then someone would set a screen on me, and then she would just run through the gates while dribbling the ball. And then slowly but surely we started taking the ball away. Like, now it's off ball screen, you're running through the gates, we're going to just fast, like lob a pass to you over the gates, track it down. And then, so things like that. And then eventually it's like, okay, you're just running. And just, but remember the feeling of having the ball, or remember the feeling of chasing the ball down, and just imagine, sounds weird, but just imagine the ball's in front of you, even though you don't have one, right? Yeah. So even though you don't have one, just imagine that feeling, or you're being chased down by LeBron. He's gonna you, so you better hustle so you don't get blocked at the cup. Things like that, and it worked. We did other things, just like fixate her vision at the end, but now it's the head tilt's gone. This was, of course, over time. This didn't happen in one day, but this was, of course, over months. But now it's gone. So that's what we did for her to emulate this like game feeling. It's to raise intention. She's one of the kids who doesn't really like to run or lift. Like she'll come to the gym. I'm tired. It's a day off of school. How can you be tired? Like she's that athlete. So that's what we did. And now in the gym, similar, we'll find ways to like incorporate a basketball to whatever drill she's doing, or to make it meaningful for her. And then for football players, what we do is either they're shed a block, like, so I'll stand in front of them and they'll shed me, run through, pass, drop, turn, chase the quarterback, or excuse me, no, like if it's a seam drop, the linebacker will just like drop into his pass coverage and read the pass and run through the gates. Just very simple things to initiate or imitate gameplay. And then they'll try to make a spectacular catch after running through the gates, things like that.
That's awesome.
So that's a basic way to do it. Yeah.
I love the idea of spectacular catch after running through the gates. Like the more you can, I mean, it's like on one end, it's like, yes, there's times to not be specific to your sport. There's times to play other sports. There's times to play other games. But I think that almost gets taken so far. It's just as an excuse to, just lift weights for an hour. And that's, of course, that's different. But at the same time, there is, if the athlete has a smile on their face and they like it, and there's something that's, even if it's like the same, you hear about, I think Dominican Republic in baseball might be an example, or Brazil in soccer. Like it's basically one sport areas, like, but it's different versions of that sport. You're playing in Dominican, you're maybe playing stickball in the street and then offside of baseball, or in Brazil, you're playing a small side game, futsal or something like that. But there's still, I'm sure there's still a smile on your face. You're still having fun. Maybe there's no pressure on one version of the game versus the other. And so I think about, that's just the thoughts that are going through my head, because I think it's just so easy to say, well, you're a sports performance, or it's funny, you would have to say strength coach. You're a strength coach. This isn't your job. This is, and I don't know. I just find it, if my job is a strength coach, though, my job is to put a smile on kids' faces. It's like, and you're going to be happy because you're getting stronger and because you're getting faster, but you're also going to have fun, and you're going to play games that may have a lot of relevance to your sport, or maybe they don't, and it's just fun because it's a game and you're just generally enjoying, moving your body and reacting. But I don't know, what do you think about that? I mean, I know your situation is probably different than like a university coach or a pro coach,
right.
Especially a professional coach too. Your job's to keep the players healthy and give them a good experience, but you're not going to like be sitting there like working there. You have pro coaches right next to you, right? But where do you feel like that blend is for the population of coaches that is working with high school and middle school athletes? Like, how do you feel that job description is for that age?
I think it's everywhere right now. Like there's no really one job description. Everyone has their, I guess, specialty. I remember when we started this shift, like a lot of us like, oh, you're just a games coach. I was like, well, sure, we use games as a tool. But I think I do that because that's what I liked growing up. And that's how I felt I got better. And so thankfully, like the kids that are here and the athletes that we're training feel the same way. But my theory is, if we have kids now, like growing up, that only play one sport, like you, myself, I played multiple sports growing up. Once football season ended, it was on the baseball. Once baseball season ended, I was like 2 months off, then back to football, soccer here and there. But these kids nowadays, they're only playing one sport, and so they're missing out, I feel like, on this transference or this immersion of skill that you can get from other sports. So I think during the pandemic, my whole process was, or my theory was, like, let's have these different athletes play each other's sports so they can see the commonalities between them and the differences. So if you get a football player to play basketball, that's going to be a workout for him. And if you get a basketball player to play soccer, it's going to be a workout for
Mm-hmm.
them. But you're working different skills, but it's still, especially soccer and basketball, it's similar enough to where they're invasion sports. So you can really pick up on things, but you're building eye foot coordination, and that can hopefully transfer into foot coordination on the court and just things like that. So that was my theory with them in this particular window. As far as for the industry, who's to say, really? Like,
Yeah.
I think you just take care of, like, all I say is, like, take care of what's in front of you and take care of them the best way you can.
Yeah. It's the athlete performance coaching as a general entity. I feel like it's kind of an infinite game. Like there's just so many possibilities. And what's the, definitive endpoint versus the unactual sport where it's like, you're going to win the game. You're going to get this many points. Here's the audience. It's just a little, I feel like the term that's why we say sometimes, what's the name of this industry again? So that's interesting. Okay, so you talked a little bit about like the tests and how you're running those, like in the flies and stuff like that. Tell me a little bit more on your approach to testing in general. Like, I know, especially in the private sector, right? A lot of people are compelled to say, okay, well, you were slow as dirt when you came here, and we probably didn't tell you how to do the test either. And now look how fast you are. You know what I'm saying? And so how do you go about testing, be it jumping or sprinting, or what are some things you like to test? And then how do you approach that to the athletes?
We test, or we time. I'll say we'll time. We time every time we're at the field. But we have a free lap, so it's like just a press of a button, so why not use it, right? So we time every time we're there, and we'll bring, or we did during the pandemic, we brought the Vertec to the track. But honestly, it was really up to them. Like, the flying 10s are always built in, flying 10s, flying 20s, because we're going to use that either on a curve, we're going to use that after figure eight, we're going to use it in some sort of game scenario, or we're just going to do pure flying 10s or 20s, just so there's like they get a maximal intent, right? As far as Vertec, as a coach, can we do? Not much has changed. Like, coach, can we Vertec today? Are you feeling bouncy? For sure, let's go. We don't really put that much stock in it because, again, we use it as a confidence tool. It's like, all right, you've leveled up. How are you going to apply it? It's like you learned a new color. It's like being an artist. All right, you got a new color in your paint palette. How are you going to blend it in? How are you going to work it in? Or you got a new technique. How are you going to figure it in to what you're already doing, or how are you going to use it in a game? And like at basketball athletes, I don't know how many times they're going to reach their max flying 10 in a game, if they ever do. But it can change their change of speed and their tempo. So they might be able to move faster and decelerate faster and things like that, and have a better change of direction or agility with that. Well, if you have the balls change direction, but it just comes down to that, the person, how they'll use it.
Yeah, it makes me think about this, like the spectrum of things we use as coaches. And it's like the coach always wants to test because we want to, feel like we're doing something, right? Like what were your, I mean, although of course we see things getting better, if you start lifting weights, you're going to be putting more weight on each week. It's pretty simple. But I think about, people talk about like testing one rep max lifting is an easy example. Some people will say, well, it's not really going to benefit you because you aren't gaining any strength by that test. You're just expressing it. And well, it helps athletes with confidence, which I would agree with. I think there's something to be said there with that. But then the same thing with like a fly 10 or a jump, which is more relevant to sport. But even still, I think I've thought about that more, and especially in listening to you and talking to you, and then just really even maybe the last year or two, is like why it is the value of making the test more informal. Like you're saying, like it's almost like we feel compelled to have the test. But I don't know, like for me, like when I was playing basketball in high school, it's not like, all right, I'm going to test and see how high I can jump on this day at this time. It's kind of like, we just ran some sprints. I feel bouncy. Let's see what I got.
Exactly.
And it's kind of like that thing where it's almost like easy strength in a sense. The easy strength lifting mentality is you don't really go much over 80% because you want to win every lift. Every lift is a win. Mm-hmm. And it's not like, and again, it's not, I think you need to fail to get better, but maybe the failure could be the technical decisions or something like that. But I think in testing, it could be the same way. It's like, I'll say this too, even for the last several years, is I've gone to the point where I will avoid testing somebody or a group if I know it's not going to be good. I'm not going to do it, because then people are just going to do it and they're going to be like, oh man, I got this. And they're going to have this like judgment about themselves, or they might lose a little faith in the system. And as long as I've been a track coach, that's always kind of been in my blood, is I'm not going to time this if it's not going to be good. Or I've seen coaches too who will time and tell an athlete they ran fast. If it's like, hey, we got this big meet coming up and we're going to time this. And I've seen pretty good coaches like see an athlete, run something or do something, and then they'll tell the athlete they were significantly faster than they were, just because it's like, you don't want to kill their confidence at that point. Like there's a lot riding there. So it's almost, so basically saying it's kind of like an a la carte. Like, here's the Vertec. If you want to go jump, go jump. If, more so than like, it is this day, it is, this test day for this thing, and that whole vibe.
Yeah, it's not a designated test day, that's for certain. Although, whenever the Vertec's there, like after like gameplay, after like the session's done, whatever you did for that day, does it turn into the Vertec Olympics? Like,
yeah, it always does.
Just like,
it always does.
It's just like, all right, I feel good. We're gonna do this, and then I'll be home like 30 minutes later than I'm supposed to be. Things like that. So that's the cool part for me, because we have the tools. And I mean, just think about it when you're in school. It's like, all right, today's a test. But even for me as an athlete, when it was test day, I was like, man, I really don't want to do this right now. Again, that's probably more me than the actual kids. Mm-hmm. So that's probably why I do it. But as far as like speed tests, like we're timing often. And it's funny that you said that about like track coaches, because we had a kid like he just got out of football. Football started late here, obviously in California, and then maybe 3 weeks ago. And then he has to go right back to off-season training in June, so the end of this month. And he was stressing this whole week, because he's like, I'm slow. Just the last 3 weeks, I'm slow. Like my flying 10 is crap, my 40 is crap. And I was like, well, you're also a linebacker. Like, let's worry about like contact. Let's worry about reshape. Like, can you get to your pass drops? Can you read the quarterback? Let's worry about things like that. He's like, but I want to be fast. And he had this like primal like desire about it. And the other day, I was like, just trust the process. Like, it's gonna happen. We're doing a lot of stimulus all at once. Like, just be patient. And then last Friday, 9.5, 9.5, 9.8, 101, 9.5 were his flying 10s. And he went from like a 115 that he was hitting like the Monday prior, a 109 the Friday prior, and just trust it.
Yeah. Getting athletes to not mentally stress about, just like, it's always the best when it just kind of happens. Like, and it's always been like that for me and I've always been I think it's nice talking to you about this stuff, because it's like where you're like, I don't want to test. Like, I was the opposite. I was like, I want to test, but I think I became so much a part of me that eventually I started stressing. It would eventually start stressing about it and putting a lot of pressure on myself. And sometimes the more pressure you have, it's just that eventually it's going to break you on some level. You have to be enjoying fundamentally and have some level of enjoyment with what you're doing, I think, when it comes to the testing. And I've seen the same thing. I used to schedule like Vertec testing for athletes, but eventually I started to realize a lot of athletes at the end of the workout, the Vertec's up, they just want to go do it. And that's so much better than me making it a thing. Like, you have to, when they get to choose and say, oh, I finished my workout, hey, I felt pretty good, that French contrast felt pretty good or whatever, let me get a jump in or two and see what I can do. And versus always having it's always there. Like, it's always as part of the script or whatever. It's like, you want athletes, isn't that the mission? If the athletes are challenging themselves on their own autonomously versus you having to schedule stuff, and then it's almost like there you gain more insight into some of the things they really like to do and enjoy, and that gives them more a feeling of just what they enjoy doing versus I guess what you the coach enjoy doing.
Definitely. And then like the good thing is like you see them autonomously like taking care of it themselves, which is also cool, because like if they can express themselves autonomously, they can also self-soothe and recover by themselves. And I think that's also, we're seeing a lot of that now after the pandemic. We went heavy into isometrics as a preparation and recovery, breath work, and seeing that, like me step away and then just watching them like train at the gym, like, oh, I'm not feeling it today, I have to get my isocades on, or I have to do a figure eight with my thumb, things like that. And seeing them handle themselves is actually a really cool feeling to where I'm just like literally standing there not knowing what to do because they're taking care of it themselves. I think that's been the newest revelation. It's been a welcome change, and it's been cool to see.
What's your take on? I didn't have this as one of the planned questions, but I think it bears mentioning because if you like everything you and I are saying is basically like it's all in the spirit of easy strength. It's like you know what I'm saying, like, but I do think there is like something to be said of doing the things that you don't want to do. You know what I'm saying? Like
right.
you always have to do something you don't want to do. You always have to approach that. You have to engage it to evolve. Life isn't just all the easy things, right? And I think anyone who coaches does know that. But how do you approach what we would call toughness, like, or getting athletes to do the athlete who maybe like they just like to have fun, but they might struggle with some of those more, I guess, toughness oriented elements, and they might crumble at certain points. What's toughness to you, and how and when do you engage that in your work?
Toughness is just doing the task, really. I don't want to say tough love, but it's like it's necessary. You're gonna just have to do it. And I'll say it differently. I'll say it's like, look, for what you want and what the goals you set for yourself, this is the path. Path is gonna suck. It's not difficult. I mean, sorry, it's not easy. It's gonna be difficult. And you just have this is the price you have to pay. And whether it's a 5-minute lunge, whether it's shock training for that day, whether it's 23-second runs. That was a big staple for our lacrosse players this past year. And we all know that's difficult. And that's not fun.
That's not easy. 23 seconds, baby.
That's the opposite of fun. And I think when you have a rapport and you're able to just like level with them, especially now that they're older, just this is it. This is it, kid. It's like, okay, you got it. But like that's the mental resiliency that's in just doing the task at hand. You don't need to be overly pumped up. You don't have to like psych them up. It's just, this is what it's going to take. And this is what's on the table. And then they'll get through it the first time. And then once they get over that 23-second run flu and they're able to talk again, wow, wasn't that bad? Yeah. But I think just by doing it, and then there's no easy way out. Like you just got to do it. Simple.
There's something that you said about that too, versus just like it's just 20 minutes of like running at the end of practice, in the sense that I think that the more relevant some of that stuff could be, like a 23-second run. Okay, you're not going to run a game for 23 seconds, but you know what? If you can do good at this, you're probably going to be pretty good at getting up and down the field, and you improve from last week. Versus, or even an ISO lunge, like you got more time than you did before. You were able to control your body and your breathing better, or you had a better expression while you were doing it, and you didn't you didn't make it seem like a big I think that some of those really simple things are the best places to bring some of that stuff out. Like it's simple, it's relevant. I don't know, I mean, maybe you could say that about anything. Like you could say that about running 2 miles or something, but yeah, right. So I don't know, I like ISOs for that, I guess, whatever that is, toughness is out of that.
Yeah, you can definitely. ISOs have been a big help with our just emotional and breath work and work capacity. It's definitely, especially talking with Jared Burton, Train Efficiently, and Brett Adams of Transcending Performance. It's definitely helped with our athletes, and lot of toughness, mental toughness, and then controlling your breath and bringing them from like a frantic stress state and able to control that frantic stress state.
Yeah.
And I think with the 23-second runs, it's like, I always forget that like college athletes have like conditioning tests to do when they get back. And so there's like running, like our lacrosse players are running like 15 100s and 10 200s. And I was like, well, if you can knock out 8 23-second runs, you're going to be fine. And obviously we didn't start with 8, like God forbid, but like it's just preparation. So dose there, like 3, 4, next time 5, 6, and then work their way up to 9.
Yeah,
it's
go. I was gonna say, I keep wanting to jump in here, but I do think like with the isometrics, at least as I've seen it with toughness, is the isometrics are not about burn tolerance to me at all. It's not about pain tolerance. It's actually about how can you use your breath to get through it. Like this is gonna be really hard, but I can actually do better if I'm fully present and fully focused on my breath. And like doing like a 4 seconds in, 8 seconds out, and nose breathing because it's like once your muscles are dying, like you can only mentally will them for so long, and I don't even know how much that really helps necessarily. I mean, there's probably something of it, but it's almost more how can I control my autonomic nervous system. And even too, like Tommy John told me, there's I copied and pasted the video and put it on my Instagram of him doing a 5-minute lunge with Vladi, and he was saying, former like training business partner of Vladi, and Tommy said he was doing great until he looked at his watch at about 4:10 or 4:15 or something, and then he started dying. So it's like everything that you do that takes you out of this exact moment is what's going to get you. And it's not just, I mean, if it's really just pain tolerance, there's a lot of things we could come up with, like, you know, like the 2-mile test or something, or, you know, there's a lot of stuff that we could, but even the 2-mile test you can overcome, I think, with the good breathing and those types of things. But I just think that toughness is such a, just to say tough, like suffering ability does not pay justice to, I think, the toughness that an athlete needs when they're on the court or doing whatever they're doing.
Yeah, speaking of toughness, most toughness does come from love, and I'll give you the story. The reason why I say that is because we have another basketball athlete, and her quote is, "I don't have to do contact. I just run around them." Like, that's her quote. Like, I just run around them. You don't need to train contact, Jeremiah. Like, I'll just run around them. Lo and behold, I think, but we did it anyway. Last week or 2 weeks ago, loose ball, dove, got kneed in the rib. She's been playing the fractured rib for the last like 4 games. And I was like, "Are you okay?" She's like, "I'm fine. I just don't want to stop playing. I'm good. Like, I just love basketball." And since that moment, I mean, even that game, she played really well. But since that, she's like had 25 or more points per game. So, I mean, that's toughness, right? Like, that's her willing herself, knowing that she's in pain and technically can't breathe, playing basketball because she loves the game. And I think if you can get to that point, that's true toughness.
Yeah, something to kind of break you out of your traditional habit or whatever mental pattern. It's like something that's going to force you to supersede that. And I think that's part of training. You know, we can weave that into training certainly too, and have that interplay. So I love that. All right, so just time for maybe a couple more questions here. So one thing, maybe we've talked about it already, but the idea of like, I know Cal Dietz is into this. Andrew Cormier talked about it. Cal Dietz probably one of the originators of this idea, but neural-perplexity are basically things that challenge an athlete's cognitive load. You talked about a little bit with like the fly tens and how we're challenging them cognitively. We're interspersing skills, game skills into already challenging movement from a coordinative perspective. But is there anything else in your training, be it the games you create or anything else, where you're really trying to challenge cognitive load, neural load, or I guess cognitive, right? Cognitive load when they're going throughout training?
We used to use, we should probably get back to it, but we used the Stroop test a lot, not only during the pandemic, but in the gym prior to the pandemic, as far as like the Stroop test, like say the color, not the word. Are you familiar with it?
No, explain it to me.
Okay, cool. So the Stroop test it's like flashcards, or it's just colors written out in their word form, but the different color of what it is. So red would be written in green, and you have to say green. But we can read faster than we can distinguish color. So that's where the hiccup lies. It's like, and I think I read this from Samuel Marcoa. He did the research on like perceived fatigue, and where they had like cyclists on a spin cycle, and they had to do like brain problems while they're doing it. And then they tested again without the brain problems, and they saw that like a 70% improvement in perceived fatigue and VO2, something like that. But we started, after reading that, we started doing that. Just simple, like go to the color of the corresponding cone. And then we started added the task, bring your basketballs. You're going to dribble while you do this. And so that's how it started. And that's what we used a lot. And it, like one kid like would point to the middle of their forehead, and it's just like, it's not hard, but it just hurts right here. And then we had the visual sticks. It's Stroop test on it too. And then they would just iso lunge while doing the Stroop with eye pursuits and saying that color for a minute of time, and then going into a task. And that's what we did. And I think think it worked. I didn't know if there was a way to actually test if it worked, but lots of feedback of like, oh, my eyes hurt, or my brain hurt. My brain
my
hurts,
brain hurts. You
coach.
know you're training it then.
It's like my fort, like just right here. So I was like, yeah, we like neural-perplexity. We probably should get back into it. We haven't done it in a while, but I think it's built into as well as just like the gameplay built in automatically to the way we structure our trainings. So yeah, but yeah, we liked it. I know Cal Leeds used to do, or I don't know if he still does it, but the subtraction while like the hockey skating. I read that. And we did, I know I use it a lot for one of our young ladies who had ACL rehab. That was her first 2 weeks. We were just doing that just to some cognitive load with her quick hands. She was a goalie, so I wanted to keep her hand quickness.
So how did that work with the hand? Like, did she have to like tap like the color, or how did that
Oh
work
yeah,
with the hand
sorry.
quickness?
Yeah, so there was 4 cones we laid out. We stacked up 2 boxes, plyo boxes. So she was just standing and she could like just rest her hands on it. And then we had 4 colored cones. So we had green, yellow, red, blue. And I would have this matching corresponding colors and like foam, like tennis balls, whatever you want to call them. And I would just throw it up and she would have to catch the corresponding colors. So catch the blue ball and grab the red and the blue cone at the same time.
Mm.
So things like that we did just to keep her eyes active and her decision making active, and some hopefully build anticipation patterns still. We do a lot of visual occlusion. We still do that, or where we'll like toss a ball, cover their eyes, and hopefully they can, by the peak of the ball, they can judge where the ball's going to be and catch it without seeing it.
That's a fun one.
That's
Throw the
that,
ball at your face. You have to have your eyes closed until I say open. And then you get to open your eyes and hopefully catch it.
we do that a lot. Hopefully, yeah. But look, take a little bit off of this throw. Don't try to kill them. But that was a go-to favorite, and it's still a favorite.
It
It's
really
fun.
redefines rehab, because usually you think of like rehab or the return to play process, right? Like the athlete probably
Hmm.
they're not going full speed with their team. Maybe they're shooting around or throwing the ball where they can, but it's like, how do you re-engage that decision-making process because we just think in terms of the physical, but like, how can we speed up the brain again? And I think
Right.
that the brain and reaction in the body too. I mean, I don't have enough experience with this stuff, but I don't feel like it'd be a leap to say if the brain's working hard, being challenged, that the body's going to actually want to catch up. Like,
Exactly. I was hoping that would be the case. Like, and it turns out it was. She got back in 7 months. But yeah, that was just the plan until the doc said, all right, she can move her knee. Then we went to slowly back into, I let the PT do what the PT does. And then we just figured out a way to scale down goalkeeping to where she wasn't moving full speed.
right on. Yeah, that sounds, I mean, just, yeah, the mind and the body and engaging that it's just nice to add those extra dimensions. And the more
Mhm.
dimensions you can add into what you do, I think they can all work together even better. Last question is just, and I like to ask these, but integrative. What does a training session look like for you? Obviously, it's different for different folks, but maybe just a sample of one population, and how does
Yeah,
this
sure.
come together? And I ask too because I think about reducing the noise, like
Right.
doing all these different things that might be all separated. How are you integrating things?
Sure. So our warm up is usually there's either two things. It's usually ISOs, a series of different ISOs, or we'll just play a small sided game for a couple of minutes. And it usually depends on the demeanor of the athletes, the way they come in. If they're like really bogged down from like play and tournaments that they're already doing, we'll spice it up. It's like, all right, let's just work our way slow into a gameplay. But if they're pretty like in good spirits, all right, we'll start with some ISOs, reps, oscillations, and then we'll go into some sort of plyo series, low extensive, whether it's just either just simple bounding, skips, and then we'll work some figure eights, and then we'll add a ball to a figure eight, and we're going to do this today, and then divide them up into teams. We'll play a little bit, flying 10, flying 20. Right now, we just have a bunch of football guys, so we'll just break up into like a small 7-on-7 sort of, or so like 4-on-4, run some routes, get back into some max speed. So flying 20s, 30s, off curve, out of position stance, tracking ball. And then we'll end for the last 30 minutes. We're playing. And it could be just like full tilt one-on-ones or full tilt Gatorball, our game that we play. And that's usually it. In the gym, depending on the day, it's just shock training. Let's keep it simple. It is what it is. So we have our depth drops, our depth jumps, depending, we have like ISO bench press. We're doing a lot of isometric work, and it's just, they feel better after. And I think that's all that matters, if they can feel better after and really ready to attack their game.
No, are those separate training days? So like it's a field day or it's a weight room day. You're not really doing like, it's not, would it be a day where you're like doing games and then you're lifting and stuff like that? I mean, I guess it's not truly that important, but I'm just curious.
No, yeah, some days we do both. So like Fridays, like today will be a field day and a gym day. Some kids will go to the gym first, then field, and some kids will go to the field, then gym. And it's work, but it's fun. I know they're probably bored of hearing my same jokes, but try to take some levity off, or just keep the stress off a little bit. For instance, we'll have kids who have basketball games today, and they'll come after their game to the gym, and then we'll do some isos for recover, and then they'll be on their way home to sleep, hopefully.
Hopefully. Awesome.
Hopefully.
Well, sounds good, Jeremiah. Well, hey, I know that's about the end of our time. So, hey, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. I always learn so much talking to coaches like you, as with all the guests on the show. But I enjoy talking to people who maybe had a different perspective than me in our time as an athlete, and everything I can learn from you and how you view all this. And so it was really wonderful engaging in this conversation, and I appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was awesome.
That wraps up another show. Thanks for being here with us. If you enjoyed the show, you can help us out by leaving us a rating or review on iTunes, Stitcher, whatever you're listening to. We'd really appreciate it. We'll see you guys next week with another great guest.